I'm here. I'm here. I swear. Just give me a second. Let the little dude pop up. Where's he at? Little guy. He's supposed to be this. Yeah, that's not working. Let me try again. There it is. There we go. Okay. We're here. We're here. Is it okay to... Nope, I should not be minimizing that one. I should just be running it in the background. Okay. I think more drapery studies today. What we'll try to do today is actually... Oh, and I should be streaming everywhere. Wait, give me a second. I see. Okay. I think what we'll try to do today is do some artist studies for the Drapery Studies instead of just doing like image studies on image studies on image studies. We'll try to do some artist studies here today and see if that can solve some of my problems. He's so late. How late is he? He's so late. His estate was dealt with years ago. What am I trying to find? My reference map. He's so late. How late is he? You'd be excused to think you were pregnant. He's so late. How late is he? My heart's not in it anymore. That is just kind of a usual stream. That is just kind of normal. Cool. So bear with me for a bit as I start the stream out by just finding the reference that I want to study. Man, when I originally started streaming, I really wanted to be the type of guy who does the reference gathering before he goes on stream. That's a little tough to do, I'm gonna have to admit. Didn't end up going that way. I'm just trying to find some 6 more vodka pieces. Logic is they're quite good, so they might just have some drapery that is also quite good. Here's one, for example. Good start. There's also Ming Chen Shen is one of my favorite painters, one of my favorite artists that actually does work similar to the work that I do at the moment. So he's a really good example. But we're just gonna be staring at my studies from the other day for a little while as I find these references. some going on here. Hope we're having a nice and chill morning. Getting ready for the trials of the day. Cool, and then let me just find some more Ming Chen pieces. Drapery and cloth. My keyboard keeps switching languages. I've had it set up before in a way where it doesn't do that. So the fact that it does that now is a little annoying. Man, art is so sick. Ming Chen Shen's pretty good too, specifically. Okay, well, I think that is something to start on. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna get you guys out of the picture. And put up the disclaimer. It goes reference disclaimer. Get that to work for the TikTok crowd as well. Add a source, make it an image source. Where's it at? Where's it at? There we go. No sound detected. Oh, I've got plenty of sound. I was just being a little quiet. And then there's one more disclaimer I also need in my... for my TikTok stream. That'd be this one. I'm gonna use that one in a bit. This one is studies. That one is reference. Cool. So here is some of the reference that I've dug out. This is a piece from Legends of Runeterra. It is a 6 more vodka piece. It is indeed by Alessandro Poli and Gerald Perel. Man, it looks like a Gerald Perel render. I am just interested in this bit here for now. And I'm just gonna dump some images in here and crop out the parts that I'm interested in. Funny thing is, and we're going to run into that problem, none of this should really be very revolutionary. It's just the same. But there's going to be stuff to learn. What I was going to say, it's just going to be the same stuff that we've observed from photo reference, but this is going to be implemented by masters. So of course there's going to be some takeaways. That. What else? This image. And this image, we're almost there. This is almost all of the reference that I want to be using today, or looking at over the next couple days, very likely. Fills the screen already. There, and this one. Cool. And then I will go on another quick bathroom break. Man, what a efficient stream so far. back and ready to get going. 36 minutes into the stream. We've done worse. We've done worse previously. I mean, I'd like to... have everything laid out so there's no overlap here. Just makes the sheet a little bit easier to study from. Almost there. Yeah, that's fine. Everything that I'm interested in is sort of visible at the moment. Merge these guys. And then we'll do something like that, and something like this. Okay. Specifically, what I'm interested in is the bent knee in a loose fitting pant leg. I had an assignment recently where I needed to do that and wasn't able to do it as well as I would like to. So that is what we want to practice today. As always, I'm starting with a little breakdown of the internal form. And then you could do your tension points. Top of the leg, this knee. To an extent, this bit of the pant where there's just like not enough fabric, and so it starts stretching. Top of the other leg, the other knee. Something like that is our tension point setup for this one. Sick. And then what I like to do recently has just been, once I have that understanding of the underlying form, I just put in like the entire sort of shape of the piece of clothing. So work big to small, right? What's the biggest shape we can lay in? Well, that's the entire shape. That's like the silhouette of the piece of clothing. Something like that. Cool. And then from here, it's like, what's the main gesture? That's going to be determined by primarily our tension points, right? So it'll be lines connecting the two knees, the two tops of the legs. And then it's going to be this bunching in the knee area. And these, more subtle in this example, but very, very important half lock folds. That create this eye shape here. I just need to remember my lesson from the other day about trying to curve these lines. So it looks like they're actually wrapping around a form. Yep. There's kind of a secondary one here that I didn't catch before. Oh, and now I switched to the other disclaimer. I switched to this one. Cool. This fabric is somewhat reflective, which means and let's just do dark on light, right? Cool. That's like the painting that we're copying. It's somewhat reflective. So it's getting this Fresnel effect around the edges. Putting them in now because that seems like a big, important part of the shapes in the painting. Cool. Your worst nightmare? Drapery. Right, we're back again. Yeah, because I've been struggling with it recently as well. So I'm trying to do more studies of it. Kind of fumbled that. There is this big pull across the fabric like that, but it leaves more space right in here for like little folds. There's like a lot of subtle value changes in here that I think I should just not get distracted by. Major point is actually for this one, though you see the half lock fold kind of subtly in the silhouette. You see these bumps that imply sort of eyes in the clothing, right? They imply this thing happening around the knee. From this angle, the artist has decided that those eyes don't actually, that they're actually quite subtle. They just come through in the, mainly come through in like the value in here. It's all form shadow. I guess the inside could be a sharper edge. And then it's just trying to think of like a bunch of cylinders. Right? Each fold is a cylinder. So we just paint a bunch of cylinders in the same sort of lighting setup. Which is like a weak or weaker top-down diffuse light source with a semi-reflective material, so when it turns away from us, it gets darker. In this case, it's kind of a bit of a front-facing light source actually in that way. Feels like a bit of a tricky reference as well, because it's hard not to make this look sort of flat. because I mean it is like the pant leg is very flat to the camera. Gonna introduce some ambient occlusion, then some highlights, and then move on to the next one. Or like a highlight value at the very least. So all the deep folds get a little bit of ambient occlusion to them. Up here, there's some rope stuff going on. We're not really gonna paint that. Then I said a highlight color. I don't actually know how necessary that is for this one. And then from here is like working all the subtle plane changes in the fabric. Making sure there's like the right amount of contrast / interest in different parts of the pant leg that is like interesting to look at if you do look at it, but it's not drawing attention from the overall composition. I don't think I'm gonna bother too much with that. I think I'd rather move on to like the next study. But there's one for the day. Sure. Do another one. Yes. It's the same kind of situation, but it is specifically that situation that I'm trying to study. Is this crook of a bent leg. So let's do that. Start with underlying form. Well, start with gesture. Do I need a quick? I think I do. Need a quick restart of the file. There we go. Something like that. Cool. It's actually facing toward us a bit more than what I drew. There we go. And then there's another dark on light. Let's put in the global shape. Tension again, same deal from the knee, from this band actually around the leg. It's another tension point. Tension from the seam in the crotch area. And from the tops of the legs. And then an excess of fabric around the knee. So what happens to that excess of fabric? And that was the right shape, just not a darker value. It starts bunching, it starts folding in on itself, and it makes these eyes in the fabric. That go to the crook of the knee. While curving, while doing these like sort of, I think that's another thing, is an S-curve movement when it comes to drapery is probably usually better than a straight. I think it's very tempting when I talk this much about tension to do straight lines. But then I look at this and that's like, well, that's clearly an S-curve. And why does he do that? Well, he does that to better imply the form. He does that to make it look like we're drawing 3D and not 2D. Pretty important, that one. Here as well. And then I guess there comes a point when you're interested enough in communicating the tension that you're fine with flattening the shapes out. But I think especially for forms that like wrap or folds that wrap across the form, I gotta get into the habit of curving them. Darker value for deeper folds and ambient occlusion. This is sort of a more classic setup for the drapery in the knee than what we had in the other study. Like this is way more subtle than what you might expect, and it's a softer fabric and there's more of it. But more often I would definitely expect to see this harsher, sharper shape, or just more protruding shape where you have the half lock folds of the knee. Give me a second, I just want to boost the contrast between my two values. There we go. I mean, I think that's my main point about this one. Is what I've drawn already. Of course, we have that same thing happening where it's not a completely matte material. So there's a Fresnel effect, darkening happening around the edges. And whether we're darkening or lightening, I think this is not like a... Some materials, of course, like inherently have like a dark Fresnel to them or a light Fresnel to them. I think this is just Ming Chen Shen deciding that the surroundings facing away from the camera, or essentially the surroundings to the side of the motif of the subject. The surroundings to the side of the subject are darker than what's behind the camera. And if you make that decision, well then the Fresnel will be dark. Cool, that's you. Then there's this other one over here. This is a stiffer fabric still and a tighter fit. But because it's a stiffer fabric still, oh no, I cut some of the, that was actually good. Where did I put it? Oh, it's here, it's here. Give me a second. Because it's a stiffer fabric still, the half lock folds around the knee will be even more prominent. Will Weston had this thing where he'd draw like a circle for the end of the humerus, and then the femur, and then another circle for the top of the tibia. So that's what I'm super messily putting in there right now. Anyway. Three finger gap, guest star. Cool. lock in the primary shape. Cool. And now these half lock folds. This is the super duper classic shape for like an eye in a piece of clothing folding around a corner, a bend. Like that's the textbook example. Cool. And I guess actually we should render this as like a two-parter. There's the values in the shadow of the overall composition, and then there's like the values in the highlight. It's two very different things. This pant leg significantly more occluded. Of course, very strategically because it makes the other one stand out. And then these same like almost like almond shapes. Pointing towards the knee. Or around it a little bit. They're like lumpy almonds. They're like offset almonds, right? So it's not like this super symmetrical shape. You take a little bit on one side, remove a little bit from one side. Makes the shape more appealing because it's more dynamic, because it's more asymmetrical. I think that's a better way to block them in. Okay. It's not quite right. There's these secondary shadow shapes that I'm having a little bit of a harder time figuring out how and why they look the way they look. There's something about like the structure in the fabric makes it naturally dip a bit in the middle between two folds and then raise up a little bit around the edge of a fold. I think that's what it is. So it's this pattern of like peaks and valleys that makes the area between two folds sometimes dip into, I mean, sometimes shadow, but in this case, simply a darker midtone, darker halftone. It's a little messy, but I think it's getting the point across. And then I think it's important to show, like what I feel like I'm lacking right now is I have sort of this feeling to the shapes. These eyes, but I think it's important to show, which is the case in the reference, that these eye shapes are sort of pinched in the back to some extent. They're not just like a perfect taper from one side to the other, but there's like fabric behind those shapes. Right, so right here, I need to sort of pinch that shape. The same up here. Cool, that's sort of the far knee there. Good morning to you too, Themias. Good morning. How are we doing today? Like, how you say my worst nightmare? Okay. What's my best nightmare? I had a dream once where I got back together with my ex-girlfriend. That's not like something I want, so it's not like it was like super stressful. It was like a stress dream because it was like, well, this is clearly not what I want in life. At the same time, though, it was pretty nice to have a girlfriend again. I think that's my best nightmare. Had some things going for it. What's your best nightmare? Can we be a little bit of like a fuckhead and just like select the light shape, which would be this and this. That's about it, right? That's about it. A little bit more curve there, a little bit more space here. And then just, you know, level adjustment the light in. We can be little freaks like that. Oh, bad. Last two adjustments were really bad. But that looks good. I don't like the settings on my Clip Studio smudge tool yet. Doesn't work like I want it to yet. I like this one fine. It's like the textured blender. Wet bleed blender it's actually called. What about textured blender? Is that better? No, I hate that one. This one is almost some FKJ shit, but it's just not quite there. This song. All right, cool. Well, that wraps up this one. I think something we've learned at this point is that the stiffer the fabric, the more structure the fabric has to it inherently, the more classic and prominent, well, the more prominent we knew that already, but the more classic the shapes of the eyes you get in the half-lock folds. And let me explain that once I'm finished fucking up this study right at the end. Okay, so we had this, the first study we did looked like this. This was the Yasuo pant leg right there. And it's a very, very loose, very pretty soft fabric. Not a lot of structure to this fabric. So the eyes here, I mean, they're there, but they could be like hella pronounced, right? But they're not. And why is that? Well, that's because as soon as I start doing this, is the theory, I'm making the fabric stiffer. Let's sort of just finish the experiment and then see if that's true to how it feels as well. So we have this versus that, and it's not like a, I don't believe this shape actually, but no matter, it doesn't have to be fully believable for you to be able to say this looks like a stiffer fabric than this. It clearly does. Fabric has so much more structure and is really holding itself up so much more in the second example. So much that it's even like uncanny or unbelievable, right? I don't expect fabric to do that. But the point is, a more intense, more classic shape form for the eye in the half-lock fold needs a stiffer fabric. And we can see that as we move to these other ones. This is a slightly stiffer fabric. This is more classic shape for the half-lock fold. This is like, I would expect this to be an even stiffer fabric. Like this is Yeah, and what are the fabrics actually? This looks to me closer to like a burlap, and this looks to me like a tighter knit. I don't know what that would be, like a canvas pant, right? So more structure, more classic shapes for the half lock folds. Cool. Should be able to do at least one more. Maybe do a squat. How did I sleep today? Oh, pretty good. Maybe some shadow boxing. My elbow. I don't know. I've always like that whip. I have something with my elbow. I don't know if it's like a weak tendonitis or whatever. And of course you can like super overextend your arm when you box, which is like really bad. But even just like holding it pretty bent, sometimes that gives me a little bit of pain. So I'm not a big shadow boxer actually. Well, I've just done like intense exercise for most of my life, and then sometimes when you push your body, it wears and it tears, right? So it's like a light injury, sure, but it's not. I don't think that it ever like happened. It just like gradually built up. Yeah. So I climb a lot these days. I climb a lot with a friend of mine who's quite a bit better at climbing than me, but still not like top of the world. Like good, like a good climber, but you know, probably not what you'd call like world class, world elite. But he's been telling me about how nobody who climbs that much, like as much as him, has like no issues with their body. There's always something. If you do like a competitive or like a high level sport to that degree, you always kind of run into something or other. This one, it doesn't have the bend, but some good points about how silhouette is affected by folds and how you want big, medium, no, big, small, medium in your silhouette. Big, medium, small, complex versus simple. Many good lessons, just not the ones that I'm looking for right now. Let's just do, I don't know, I've seen Ming Chen, you do better sometimes, I think. What's behind these guys? Kinda him doing better. Looking specifically for knees. I guess there's this one. We'll do that. Huh? Oh. There you go. Oh, no. Not on the background. And we start with underlying form. Who'da thunk? And this is just me drawing through the form, don't mind me. What was the grouping we had the other day? It was iliotibial band with a lateral quad. Don't think we did that, right? Give me a second. The thing I'm looking for might be somewhere in this document. Yep, I think it is indeed. Not here. Not quite here. Here it is. Yeah, I see. It's grouping the lateral quad with the tendon from the iliotibial band, maybe even the biceps femoris, and then sort of routing that into the great trochanter. Greater trochanter. Oh, sorry, I missed some chat. You like Ming Chen's goblins a lot? Yeah, me too, man. I had one of them as my desktop background for a long time. I really like. He is probably one. Like he's like one of my top 20 artists. really mess with him. But he didn't make it really to my influence map because I pivoted more into comics, and he's a little bit more like Righty Splash like in his style. Yeah, okay. So what I wanted to draw was not this at all. It was like this. Anyway, that's not even really what it was supposed to be about. That's just like a lesson that I wanted to not forget. Group the quad with this tendon, the underside of the quad with this tendon, and lead it into the greater trochanter. It works better on muscular people because you're kind of any sort of hip fat you're removing, because this line right here delineates like the leg inserting into the gluteus maximus here, or in like wedging into the form of the gluteus maximus, which only really happens if you're very lean. Anyway, let's try to draw some drapery. You'll make your own influence map too. Yeah, I think it's a nice thing to do. I think maybe I got a little too obsessed with it. I don't know, maybe not. I really needed it. Cause my art style really was so disparate. Like there wasn't really an art style. I think we're moving towards something now. I think I'm like making decisions that work more synergistically now in my art. Even though I still want to tweak it here and there. I think it just like works better as like a whole, since I made the influence map and really thought about like mainly studying the artists that are on there. I know these guys aren't, and so like, what, Jacob, why are you studying these guys right now? Well, I have work tasks, I have assignments where I have to be able to do this kind of work, where I need these skills that these artists just very classically demonstrate. Okay. A lot of thin shapes, as we have some bunching around the hip flexor, because that's bent as well. Bunch of little tense shapes here, and then I don't know. either this is not as good as the other examples, or I just don't understand why it is as good. I mean, it's still really well done. Shapes feel a little bit less clear to me, and a little bit less like clearly communicating the bend of the leg. And maybe it's just because like this big metal thing is interfering with the read. Yeah. But I think classically it makes a lot of sense to make like one or two prominent eye shapes. In these knee bends. This one over here has two, right? This one has one. This one isn't quite like an eye. And this one had the one, but it's like quite subtle. This one has the one. Make one or two clean, clear eye shapes correspond to how much fabric do you have to work with and what's the stiffness of the fabric. Then once you have that in there, it's just like putting a bunch of secondary shapes in there, showing some additional bunching. With a tighter fabric, with a tighter pant leg, which this is, they'll often be smaller because there's simply not enough fabric for the folds to be very big. XYZ shapes. Some zigzag folds where the fabric isn't necessarily like as clearly or unilaterally doing one thing. Right, again, what Weston's phrasing is when the fabric is sort of confused, doesn't know what to do, you'll often get these zigzag folds. So it's often in like transitional zones between fully like relaxed fabric and very bunched fabric. So if this bend in the hip is like our fully bunched fabric, over here we have a big plane of relaxed fabric, an area of rest as well. It's quite well done. Well, then between the two, between the area of rest and this crazy bunching over here, we get these zigzag folds. Cool. Great. I think that is all the drapery studies we'll have time for this morning. Let's punch the contrast a little bit so it looks a little better. Sick. Studies, indeed. Cool. Then, hell yeah. We have 5 minutes left. I thought it could be fun to do like a quick walkthrough of my own influence map and my thoughts about it. Cause we did have that video. Yes, let's go. Should be in here, and then in here. Here we go. And then I'll just turn off the little studies disclaimer. There we go. Let me just like quickly structure some of my thoughts on a post-it note. Sick. So, this is my influence map. A quick breakdown. I am very inspired by comics and comics-inspired artists. I have a couple of actual working comics artists in here. This is Kim Jacinto, Western comics artist. This is Kei Urana, who did Gachiakuta, so a Japanese comics artist. Then I have some very comics inspired artists in here. This is Gary Vanica. This is Art of Maki Planas Mata. Nope, I can't remember his name. Maki Planas Mata, I think. And this is this artist that I only know from Instagram, Liamu. I'll write it out. Like that. And then I also have Soul Fighter in here. So the idea is I like very dynamic, and I like comics, I like sharp, I like impactful. And that's why I have a lot of artists like this in here. I have to admit, this influence map still feels a little bit confused to me, or a little bit of like of two moods. Because Liamo here I like so much because his drawings, their drawings are so dimensional. They're so volumetric, but at the same time it's got like very good shape design. And you could look at Maki, you could look at Gary or the Soul Fighter skins and notice just how dimensional those are. Then I've got stuff like and TB Choi as well is like a super dimensional volumetric draftsman. This person O2, though it's anime 02 on ArtStation, is also very like dimensional in the way they draw. And then I just also have this love for dramatically stylized shapes. That's where I have Kim Yasinto. That's where I have this person Madao on ArtStation. Where it's they understand form, but also they clearly have a love for like pushed dramatic shapes. That shines through even maybe beyond sometimes their love of form. This, by the way, is Wan Young Yun. Pretty sure. Let's check. Let's make sure that we're... Yeah. And I haven't fully figured out yet how they fit into the system, but I just like the art enough that it's here for now. Anyway, there's this divide that I'm still figuring out, where it's like, how much do I push three-dimensionality and form understanding in my drawings, and how much do I allow myself to push crazy extreme shapes? Kei Urana is kind of like an in-between. Yeah, so that's what I'm figuring out at the moment, but I know that I enjoy both sides enough that I want to find a happy middle. And maybe it just looks quite a lot like Liamu here. We'll find out. Last thing is I have some hip-hop albums on here. This to me is something I'm really passionate about. I like the attitude in hip-hop, and again, I like the impact I think that hip-hop can have, the confidence it has, and that's something I try to foster in my art, as well as I like streetwear and street aesthetics, and so that's in my mind represented by this square as well. Yeah, so that is my influence map. Still a little bit messy. I'm still figuring it out a bit, but I really desperately want not just like good 3D volumetrics in my art, but also like fun, dramatic shapes. So figuring out how to do that. Gary Vanica is also really good at that. he kind of has both. Anyway, that is going to be the end of the stream. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for joining. Hope to catch you in the next one. Very, very nice. Thank you. Yeah. See you around.